So when it comes to user decision analysis, one part is like, how do you look at all these different lease options?
You can eat the skin of the apple, but I'm not so sure I want to eat the skin of an orange or a banana.
And actually compare them.
There are lots of things that are different, but they're all fruits.
And then communicate it.
And then negotiate it.
Well, the analogy holds true for real estate too.
Like the way he's explaining this is incredibly easy to follow.
They're all buildings, but one's gross, one's net, one's modified gross, one's got the base year.
What you're talking about is a huge annoyance.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
And now we can look at these 5 financial metrics.
Like, how on earth do you put all of that together and actually make a good decision for your business?
And lay them side by side and say, okay.
And so I think we're going to get to plow some new ground on this episode.
Awesome. I tell you what, right now I'm a dry contact, and I feel like, Jim, you got the solution.
Timmy, money doesn't grow on trees. Because I wish it did, because I'd like to plant a money tree.
I'd open an orchard. A money orchard.
More than that.
Yeah.
All right. So let me introduce you, by the way, to our special guest, Jim Rosen.
Yes, please do.
Out of St. Louis.
Please do.
I know Jim Rosen because he's a CCIM instructor. And he has been for how many years now?
27.
27 years. Okay. For me, 5 years. For Jim, 27. And he's not only a senior CCIM instructor in 101 and 103, but he's a multiple-time award-winning instructor of the year in both courses.
Let's go, Jim. Let's go, Jim.
Jim's one of these guys, like when you're a new instructor like me,
Yeah.
there are certain instructors you're like, man, I want to be like him when I grow up. And I want to. Now, the problem with Jim is he doesn't teach what I teach. So I've never gotten to teach with him. And hopefully sometime in the future, we'll end up teaching the same course and we can teach together because I'd love to have that experience.
Yeah.
But he's one of those instructors where, multiple award winning, everybody on the cadre knows, man, hey, he really cares about his students. He prepares like nobody else. Like he does a great job. So I'm really excited today to have him here. Not only is he a great instructor, but he's been in the business for 30 plus years. And he does something in the industry that we haven't talked a lot about. And so I think we're going to get to plow some new ground here on this episode.
Awesome.
But
awesome.
To what he just alluded to, kind of in the background, you can see the officials, the referees. What's the word? Is it referee or official or?
Yeah, so either one works.
Okay. But he's in like multiple Hall of Fames. Like there's been news stories about him.
Jim!
He's like, I think now, what did I read? Like you're on the rules committee where you interpret the rules.
Yeah, I'm the rule interpreter for the state high school the State High School Activities Association. So I conduct clinics for coaches and officials, make sure everybody's on the same page. Gives me a chance to get out and speak in front of an audience and to teach. Oh my goodness.
And he's a pilot.
I saw that, yeah.
And he's building a train set or a train model for his grandkids.
Wow.
Welcome, Jim Rosen. We're so excited to have you on the show. And yeah.
Thank you, Bo.
Yeah.
You're making me blush. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But he's also the guy, I think we were in Seattle, and we've been doing the show, this is last October. We've been doing the show maybe 8 months at that point. He sees me in the hallway, and he's the first guy who starts asking me about you.
Oh, really?
Now, that's happened numerous times now.
Right.
But he was the first guy ever. He's like, how's Timmy doing? And I was thrown off. I was like, what do you mean, Timmy? And he's like, no, I've been listening to you and Timmy. Like, how's Timmy doing and stuff?
Oh, that's amazing.
I was like, this is so cool. Jim Rosen listens to our show. I was like,
and now he's on it.
Yeah, now he's on. So, man, thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us. And I'm excited to let Timmy learn from the great Jim Rosen.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a pleasure.
And Jim, there's one question I want to ask you before we jump into anything else. Do you have a tattoo?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right. Just curious.
Okay.
Well, I know Bo's got one on his back, and
I've got one. My experience was it was somewhat painful.
You know what? They're expensive and they're painful. Mm-hmm. And if you want to do something expensive and painful, the real estate business is right for you.
Yeah. I think he just gave us our YouTube short right there.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, Jim, tell me, before we jump into what, CI 103, which I didn't know there was a 103. I want to hear a little bit about you, how you got into the business, just like a 5-minute origin story, if you would.
Gosh, Timmy, so I started out as a classroom teacher, and which is my passion for education, and really just absolutely loved what I did. But at that time, it was, for a single person, pretty good way to make a living. But after I got married, it was a little bit more difficult. And got into the business world and thought I always had a passion for real estate and would like to learn more about it. But Sherry and I had just started a family, and had the typical house in the suburbs, with a couple of cars and a mortgage. I'm not sure that I would have been completely comfortable with a straight commission job. So I just learned the sales job and learned to go into the business world until the company that I was working for, quite fortuitously, got sold, and they shut down their St. Louis location.
Oof.
Which left me with a pink slip and a nice severance package, which was good because it wasn't for cause, and it was like, okay, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was almost scared to death to go home and tell my wife that I didn't have a job.
Yep.
But she looked at me, as only Sherry could do, and said, "It's the best thing that ever happened to you."
Wow.
Because you're not happy doing what you're doing. And there were two things. She said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, really, two things: television, radio, or real estate." And I wouldn't be the kind of guy who would be on the front side of the camera, maybe on the back side, maybe in production, maybe in sales, something. And I started interviewing for positions in those two industries, and real estate is the one that came along, and I just had a great passion for it ever since.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Television. Yeah. I mean, you got a voice for it too.
Yeah,
like I know
for
you're
sure.
saying, like, not so much on the,
Voice for radio. I got a face for radio.
Face for radio.
Maybe producer Todd Humphreys and I could have a show together.
Yeah. You mentioned you had a passion for real estate. When did that start?
That's really a good question. I mean, I like to be creative and to generate transactions that are not scripted, and every deal is different. I think Bo will tell you that there are some unique things to commercial real estate, but every deal is different, and you have a blank sheet of paper that you can start with, and you can, within morals and ethics and, being legal about it, you can craft that deal any way that you want to. And that's a real challenge. I enjoy the opportunity to help people achieve their goals. And so there's a personal side of that. And then, of course, I could marry up my educational passion with my real estate passion, and then, found the CCIM Institute and never look back.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that he just admitted that he married up.
Oh, my goodness. Happily to do
And
it.
I've met Sherry, and he's right.
Yeah.
Just like you and me. And we have outpunted our coverage.
Yeah, that's true. 3 lucky men.
Yeah.
3 lucky men here.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. How many CI 10 whatevers are there? 3?
There's 4.
There's 4.
So to get your designation, you take and pass 4 classes: 101, 102, 103, 104. And then there's a few electives. One of them is negotiations that Jim also teaches.
Oh.
And a couple other smaller classes that you take. There's a portfolio of qualifying experience. So you have to have done a requisite amount of deals to prove that not only can you learn this, but you can apply it to your business in the service of your clients. Or that's from you don't have to be a broker doing the deals. You can be an investor. But you have to demonstrate that you've used the concepts that you've learned in the courses in real life. That's your portfolio of qualifying experience. And then you can sit for the exam, the comprehensive exam.
Gotcha. So CI 101 is the demand side?
CI 101 is how to underwrite a property.
Oh, yes. How to underwrite. CI 102 is like the market analysis stuff. And then, Jim, what are you teaching me today?
So Timmy, CI 103 looks at all that 101 stuff that Bo has had you learn from various points in time in terms of the cash flow model, in terms of some decision metrics. I think you recall IRR and NPV. Gosh, Bo, could those be good pop quiz questions?
Oh, they could be.
They could be, yeah. I do need a refresher.
So interestingly enough, Timmy, we're thinking about in 103, we're going to turn the hat around and look at things from the user's perspective. Because up until this point, Bo has been exclusively focused on the investor side.
Right.
And so, Bo goes in and he syndicates a property, or top producer Todd Humphrey is representing the landlord in a transaction.
That's right. Top producer
Right?
Todd Humphrey.
And the landlord, the investor, the landlord is looking for maximum return on their invested capital, right? I mean, that's their ultimate game. But the user's the one that's paying the freight. The user's the one that's paying the rent in order to create the return, or at least the return from operations on the deal. So we need to start to think about, how does the user look at the acquisition and operation of commercial real estate? Because the user doesn't really care about how much money the landlord's making.
No. No.
Right? If you're going to rent space, is your key motivation how much money you can make your landlord?
Nope.
No, not at all. So, gosh, Timmy, I mean, if you were a tenant, what is it that you want to do?
I want to pay the lowest amount of money. And
No, as the tenant, you probably want to pay the least amount of money.
yes,
Lowest.
yes,
Yeah,
least.
lowest.
Mhm, lowest.
Lowest. Oh, yeah.
Least.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're looking for maximum utility at, dare I say, minimum cost. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the absolute cheapest is the best one, because you'll have some subjective factors about location and amenities and, frankly, even things that don't have anything to do with the deal, like how far is it away from the boss's house,
Right.
right?
How
And
prestigious is the address?
Yeah. Is it served by a highway? If it's an industrial building, is it served by a rail line where goods and services can come out? Is it in the right area for all that 102 job growth stuff that Bo talked to you about? So the economics will only get you so far, and then we'll layer in some subjective factors. And at the end of the day, the decision is part art, part science.
Oh, wow. I like Jim a lot.
Yeah.
I like Jim a lot.
I was thinking, what about if we just turned the hat around and looked at all of these great metrics that he's been teaching you from the opposite perspective,
Love it.
and look at it from the user's perspective of maximum utility at minimum cost? Because let's face it, if we think about the cost of the real estate to the user, it's buried in a P&L someplace. It's buried, how many lines deep in an Excel spreadsheet, as cost of occupancy or rent. The user is going to be focused on the widgets that they make or that they sell. And they need to acquire real estate to house their people, or to house their computers, or to sell their product, or to manufacture their product, or to warehouse it. They're not acquiring real estate for the purpose of making money on it.
Right.
Now, in the real world, some are. Yes, they'll run dual paths. But for purpose of our conversation, the user is acquiring real estate for a business purpose,
Okay.
to manufacture or to distribute or to sell their stuff and to house their folks.
All right. So we're not looking at residential in this particular thing at all.
No.
No, not multifamily at all.
Okay. Okay, great.
But frankly, even if you were looking at an apartment scenario and you were looking for a place to live, you probably would look at 2 or 3 or 4 different apartments in the trade area in which you want to live, right? That have the amenities like Happy Monday that you would want to frequent all the time.
That's right. Wow.
And so you want to make sure that you were in the right place at the right time, but you wouldn't go look at one community. You'd probably look at 2 or 3 or 4 communities, and intuitively you would probably pick the one that was the coolest looking space for a reasonable amount of rent.
Yes. Yep.
You might not pick the cheapest, you might not pick the most expensive one, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a gut feel where you and your wife and your children feel most comfortable on the multifamily side.
All right,
no,
cool.
for purpose of our conversation, yeah, we'll stick to retail, office, and industrial. That's okay.
All right, say more.
Yeah. So has Bo talked to you about different kinds of leases, Timmy?
No, not really. Maybe at a super high level. We've talked lease terms and maybe mentioned it a couple times.
We did an episode way back when where we went through some lease clauses,
Yes.
but that's been a long
no
time,
kidding.
and we're probably going to need to refresh his memory.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that we could
Oh,
do that.
wait. Hold on. There's long-term lease, short-term lease,
Yeah.
Well-
yeah.
a net. There's a net lease. There's a pass-through type of lease.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's there in the
yeah,
back.
there's
Yeah.
some tingling in the back of your mind.
That's right. So I know. Yeah, there's a
Lease clauses. You know what they call the guy that works in Santa's workshop?
what?
A subordinate clause.
Subordinate clause.
Leases are going to be categorized by the treatment of the operating expenses.
Wait, let me stop you real quick. I apologize. What does it mean to you when he says operating expenses?
It's like who pays for the damage in the parking lot, the lights, the electricity, the Wi-Fi, the roof, those things, right?
Property taxes, property insurance, common area maintenance, who repairs and maintenance, all that. Like, how are those things treated? Okay, good.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there has to be some upkeep on the property, and of course the government's going to have their hand in it in terms of real estate taxes that are generated by the property for they go then to the library district and the school district and the other kinds of things for which the government uses the funds that it collects.
Thanks, Obama.
So those operating expenses can be paid by the landlord, or they can be paid by the tenant, or they can agree to share them. And so at one end, if you think of a set of bookends, Timmy, maybe with things at either side, on either side, at one end of the continuum is an absolute gross lease, in which case the tenant writes one check for rent, landlord pays everything else. All those operating expenses that you and Bo just talked about.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from a landlord's point of view, it's gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is Bart Simpson rolling through my head? Gross, man.
Yeah.
Okay. At the other end of the continuum, the other bookend is going to be an absolute net lease. All right, so here's a scenario where the tenant not only pays a base minimum rent, meaning just the rent on the premises, but they also then have those pass-through expenses where they're going to pay utilities and they're going to pay their own janitorial and they're going to pay their own common area of maintenance, or at least their proportionate share of it. They're going to, all these expenses are going to be passed through, and they're paying for absolutely everything, including, if it's a single tenant building, repair of the structural components, which typically tenants don't, that's typically going to be a landlord responsibility. But in an absolute net, tenant pays for everything. In an absolute gross scenario, landlord pays for everything. And then you've got all these hybrid leases, I guess we could call them, in between, where the landlord and the tenant will agree to share the operating expenses. So you pay some, I'll pay some, or maybe there are some things, Timmy, called an expense stop, where the landlord would say, I'm going to pay up to a certain amount and I'm going to stop. You pay every incremental piece over that. And that stop is usually set at the amount of expenses for the first year of the lease. Call that a base year.
Okay.
So the landlord will pay up to the expenses of the first year. And of course, even though the rent may be flat for a while, or may not escalate, we know the expenses will. So the landlord pays that amount every year, and any incremental increases over that, the tenant pays. Now, the tenant might say, that gives me some pretty big exposure. The extent of my exposure is completely limitless. And so the tenant might say, well, gosh, landlord, that's not really cool for me. I need some protection. So how about if I put a cap on the amount that I have to pay? So I'll pay up to a certain amount, in which case I kind of bump my head against that cap. And then landlord, you pay everything over that. So a stop and a cap are really the same thing. It's a limit of one's exposure, but looked at from either the landlord or the tenant's perspective.
Gotcha.
If we think about a tenant rep who would, let's say in an office scenario, would be going out looking for space, and they would start with a needs analysis, an interview of the tenant, of their client, and say, look, dude, what do you need? How much? How big? What's your budget? What kind of amenities do you need to have? What kind of parking do you need to have? I mean, the list just goes on and on and on forever, right? Of all the big and the little things that in the perfect world, this we'll call them user, because they're going to be utilizing the premises, would want to have, okay? And a lot of that includes the location quality that Bo has talked to you about just in your previous 3 or 4 episodes when he looked into a market to see what the market looks like from the investor's perspective, because the bricks and mortar are inextricably tied to the dirt. It's not like you can pick it up and move it. Right. Well, kind of the same way with the trade area from the user's perspective. You know, is this area someplace where they can get the employees they need to operate their business? Do they have the, gosh, Bo, what do you call the series of transportation? You call them linkages.
Linkages.
Yeah.
Linkage.
So do they have the transportation linkages to get people and goods and services, you know, from one place to another? Back and forth, you know, to this. And so all that 102 stuff, you know, comes into play. So you've interviewed the client and you've done this needs analysis, and now you've got to create some value. So you go out and survey the market and you see how many properties in the market check all those boxes. None of them are going to check all the boxes, but the largest component of them. And then you might whittle that down to maybe 2, 3, 4 properties. And you say, okay, any one of these 3 or 4 properties might work. If you're in the office or maybe the industrial side. If you're in the retail side, it's a little different, right? You need to be on the far corner on the going to work side if you sell donuts, because there aren't a lot of people who buy donuts and coffee at 5:30 when they're on their way home. Right? So
that's
you need
true.
to be at a certain location. You know, if you look at 4 corners of an intersection, you may need to be on one specific corner in the retail arena. So we'll set that one aside for just a minute. But in the other ones, it's like, okay, you know, any of these 3 or 4 buildings might work out. So you send out a proposal to their landlords and say, you know, here's my tenant, here's what I'm looking for. What are your terms and conditions on this much space? We've come to find out that all buildings are created different. They have different efficiencies, right? Some of them are more useful space and less common areas. So we can talk about the efficiency of the space. And frankly, the office suites are of different sizes too. And sometimes landlords will quote the economics as a rentable number, and sometimes as a usable number. The usable, Timmy, mean just the amount within the 4 walls of your space where you can put your stuff. You can put your filing cabinets, you can put your desk and your telephones and your computers and everything. But then the rentable, you have to find a way to get to your space. So you have some non-exclusive use of the hallways. And people need to go to the bathroom over the course of the day. So you're going to, you know, have non-exclusive use of the bathroom, you know, unless you're going to, you know, install a phone and a computer table in there in one of the stalls, and, you know, that's where you're going to work from. Right?
That's like an episode of The Office right
there. Jim!
All right. Anyway, so if you take the usable that you have exclusive rights over and add in your proportionate share of the non-exclusive space that you use, you end up with what's called rentable.
Did I tell you the story of the doctor who was refusing to pay on a rentable basis? Like, he just wanted to pay what was inside his walls, but he wasn't willing to pay a cent for his proportionate share of the hallways and the lobby and the facilities and et cetera. Have I told you this before?
I don't remember this.
Well, this is a story I heard about another market.
Oh, okay.
What they did to make the point is the landlord rep said, look, so we'll allow you to do that, okay? But you're on the 2nd floor. We're going to run a ladder up to that window there, okay? And we're going to put a porta potty down here, okay? And so you can't use the hallways, and you can't use the facilities.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not paying for them. And I get it. You don't want to. That's fine. So we'll donate the ladder to you.
Yeah.
And you and your patients can use the ladder to crawl through the window, and you can use the porta potty down here. We'll just give that free of charge.
That was nice.
And then at that point, the landlord or the doctor begrudgingly was like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
he understood at that point, wasn't happy about it.
That's a great way to do it.
But that's the difference between usable and rentable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
You got to have a place where your patients can park.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
And the parking lot has to be maintained. It has to be appropriately striped. It has to have lights in the evening. It's probably going to be landscaped. Right. Well, and that there are just maintenance costs to do that.
Right.
So that everybody pays their, quote, their fair share of it.
The rentable also includes the usable, or are those two separate things?
Rentable is usable plus your share of the common area.
Okay, cool.
And that speaks to the efficiency of the building. How much usable square footage is there compared to the total size of the building, which we'll call GLA, which is called gross leasable area.
Okay.
Right. And so the greater the usable space, the more efficient the building is. So you walk into some of these, beautiful chrome and glass office buildings with 2- and 3-story atriums and waterfalls. And I mean, all this really kind of stuff that have the wow factor when you go in there. It's like, man, this is cool. You can't lease the space in a 2- or 3-story atrium. So that building is a little less efficient, which means your proportionate share of the common areas are going to be more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So anyway, getting back to our discussion, you go out and you find 2, 3, 4 different buildings, for your user, and you put out a request, and they all come back with different sizes. In other words, the suites within that, you might be looking for 5,000 square feet, and one comes back at 4,500, and one comes back at 5,250, and right there's no exact number that you're looking for. They're all different sizes, so you have that to deal with. And then maybe one property owner quotes you on a rentable basis, maybe 2 more quote you on a usable basis. So that's different. You have that to deal with.
Right.
Right. They're all commercial real estate, but we're trying to come up with a like kind method to compare dissimilar products.
Can I agitate this just a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Because what you're talking about is a huge annoyance.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
So let's say you have 4 properties. They come back, and they're all different sizes. Some of them are quoting, like he said, some unusable, some unrentable. They have different efficiencies.
Right.
So the ratio between usable and rentable is different.
Right.
Right. So not even close to apples. Some of them are newer buildings, which likely means they've been assessed more recently and their property taxes are higher. Mm-hmm. So those operating expenses are nowhere close to being equal. Mm-hmm. So you've got different sizes, you've got different ways of quoting it, you've got different price per square foot, you've got different operating expenses, and then you've got all the subjective stuff. Like this building has some amenities I like, this one has a location I like better, and this one I like. How on earth do you put all of that together and actually make a good decision for your business?
Yeah.
Like,
that's a real problem.
Yeah. I tell you what, right now I'm a dry contact, and I feel like, Jim, you got the solution.
Yeah, well, the solution your brother's already taught you, believe it or not.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
What? Net present value.
Yes!
For real?
Are you kidding me?
Wow.
You rocked it.
That was self too. That came out of, I didn't even think. It just came out.
Yeah, so let's think about this for a minute, Timmy, right? Because as Bo said, on top of that whole laundry list of things, we're going to have some that are going to be quoted where the landlord's paying all the expenses, and some maybe the tenant, and some kind of this hybrid stuff in between. You pay a little, I'll pay a little.
Right.
So the only way that we could really do this is to spread out all these lease terms to a series of cash flows.
Okay.
And then how much do we expect it's going to cost us in year 1 and in year 2 and in year 3, all the way out through the end of the lease. And by the way, Bo, have you taught Timmy about time period 0?
We've talked about time value of money, but we haven't really talked much about time period 0.
So, Timmy, there are going to be some expenses that are going to come into play before the lease even commences, like tenant improvements. You're going to have to fix the place up and put in your Cat 5 or Cat 6 wiring or your infrastructure. You're going to have to paint it, furniture, all that kind of stuff. You're going to have to move. So you're going to have to pay somebody to run the truck over to your new place or your old place, back it up, pack it up. And frankly, if somebody's trying to entice you to come to their building and you might have some term left over in your existing building, you don't want to pay 2 landlords. So maybe Bo, as a smart businessman, might give you an allowance to allow you to buy out of the last part of this lease so you can move now instead of later. And so all of that kind of stuff goes into play prior to lease commencement. We'll call that time period 0.
That's a great name for an action movie.
Time period 0.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or a war movie. Or
who would star in that, Timmy?
Mocky Mock. Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg and Eugene Levy.
I love Eugene Levy.
I love him so much.
He has such a dry sense of humor.
Yeah, I love him so much. And you remind me so much of him.
Was he the American Pie guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
He's Christopher Guest guy. Yeah. Best in Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, Waiting for Guffman.
And actually, wasn't his wife on the show Home Alone's mother?
That was his.
And she's in Best in Show as well, isn't she?
Catherine O'Hara. So they are like, yes, that's right. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct.
That's her.
Yeah, right.
I love her too.
There's some real talent there.
Yeah, Second Citizens.
Really?
Oh,
Both of them?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Second City in Canada, both on Second City TV. Yeah. I love them.
Nice. So anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, we're talking about comparative lease analysis, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we're going to spread this thing out, and we're going to say, hey, look, how much is the sum total of all the expenses that we expect to incur over the life of this lease? Cool. We'll just call that average. Let's call that total effective rent. And then going off of that, we could say, I don't know, so, how much per year would that be? We could divide that by the term and call it average effective rent. And we could take that number, divide it by the square feet of the size, and say, okay, so what's the average effective rate per square foot per year? Right? So we could come up with all that kind of metrics, right? But the interesting piece is, if we spread out the cash flows in the time periods in which we forecast them to occur, we've set up a time value of money equation. Because Bo has previously taught you that $1 today has greater value than $1 in the future, right?
Thanks a lot, Obama.
We don't want to say that future dollars are worthless,
right,
but they are worth less than they are today.
Yep.
For lots of different reasons. So the timing of those cash flows makes a difference. Mm-hmm. And if you've already set them up into the years in which you forecast them to occur, then why couldn't you discount them back to present value and net them against that time period 0 expense?
Wow.
And that's your NPV.
Jim is great. Like, the way he's explaining this is incredibly easy to follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from a CI 101 perspective, there's a little difference between present value and net present value. Mm-hmm. And if I take all those future cash flows, discount them back, I get a present value. If I net that against my time period 0 expense, I get a net present value. So, Timmy, while you're writing down, the sum of the discounted future cash flows netted against the initial value, the initial expenses, is NPV.
Say that one more time.
Sum of the discounted future cash flows netted against the initial expenses at time point 0 is your NPV.
Yeah, and if you look at it from the investor's perspective, the initial investment, right? And I guess you could say the user's making an initial investment in the TI and in the space and that kind of stuff, right? But you're essentially taking those future cash flows back to time period 0 and netting against your time period 0 expenses.
Yep.
But here's the cool thing.
We're not even at the cool thing yet?
Nope.
Here's the cool thing.
All right.
The cool thing is that Bo talked to you about the value of this discount rate. Remember that? Because when we bring those future cash flows back to time period 0, we do so by applying a discount rate.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? We're discounting them from the future back to the present.
Yes.
I don't know about your mom and dad, but I'm guessing that they were a lot like my mom and dad in that they would tell you when you were a kid, saying, I want this, I want that. You'd see something bright, shiny object and you just had to have it. and you knew what buttons to push, and kids will throw a temper tantrum and they'll whine and complain, and I mean they know how to negotiate intuitively.
That was our brother Jay.
Yeah.
He would throw the temper tantrums.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The first time I heard my dad curse was calling Jay a smartass.
And then, of course, the parental response is, Timmy, money doesn't grow on trees. Because I wish it did, because I'd like to plant a money tree in my, in some place in my backyard. I think that would be so cool.
I'd open an orchard.
So
Money orchard.
So the point being is there's a cost to the money you raise. And the rent is being paid out of the capital that's raised by the company. And there's a cost to that. And so that discount rate incorporates the cost of capital. And Bo talked to you about that weighted average cost of their debt and equity portfolios a few weeks ago. In a corporate world, we're incorporating the cost of money into the discount rate. And so when we pull all those future cash flows back, we've incorporated the cost of money to that individual user. So that the NPV then gives you today's cost of executing that long-term lease, or that lease for however long it is, incorporating with the cost of funds to that specific user. And so and just like on the investment side, on the user side is the application of the discount rate, which ties a generic set of cash flows to a very specific user. So it's your cost, or it's Bo's cost, or it's my cost. It's been tied to that specific user. What's it worth is one thing. What's it worth to you is another thing, right? What you would pay for it. Difference between market value and investment value, right? And you would have different criteria, and you would have different cost of funds.
Now, can I say that another way?
Yeah, please.
Jim has different clients that he works with, one of which is Hardee's, I believe, and sometimes you work with Walmart as well.
I do.
Both
I'm
will
very
lease.
fortunate to be part of their third-party outsource team.
Yeah. So both of those users lease space. Do you think they have different criteria?
Well, yeah.
In every way, right?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think their discount rates are different?
Yes.
So if they had some sort of similar office use, corporate office use that they were considering, do you think Hardee's and Walmart would look at that space with different criteria and a different discount rate?
Yes.
Yeah, so they would evaluate the same generic future cash flows and discount them back based on their business, their cost of capital,
right,
their requirements. And they could look very, very different. And that's essentially what the point Jim's making.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And particularly for their office or their warehousing needs.
Yep.
For their retail needs might be a little different, because a retailer will look at the value they could pay for a location as a function of the sales they could generate. And so they may be willing to pay a little bit more if they can capture a larger percentage of their target customer.
Yeah.
You know, there's a location value that's kind of tied into that, as well. But on the office industrial side, yeah, absolutely. And so now we're thinking, okay, now we can look at these three buildings, and try to compare an apple to an orange to a banana, right? They're all fruits, but they're very different kinds of fruits. The seeds are different. You can eat the skin of the apple, but I'm not so sure I want to eat the skin of an orange or a banana. Right. I mean, they're very different. They're different shapes, all kinds of stuff. There are lots of things that are different, but they're all fruits. Well, the analogy holds true for real estate too. They're all commercial real estate. They're all buildings, but one's gross, one's net, one's modified gross, one's got the base year, one's this big, that big, right? And we put them all together, and now we can look at these 5 financial metrics and lay them side by side and say, okay, initially we're going to choose the one that gives us the greater value, which in this case might be the lesser cost.
Right.
Then we can layer in the subjective stuff that Bo was talking about. I mean, layer in the trade area, and layer in the close to the amenities. Is it close to places where you can go for lunch? Is it close to a public transit line to get people in and out that may choose not to drive?
Linkages.
Linkages, yes. There you go. 102 stuff. Love it.
That's a good word.
Linkage.
Linkage, leakage.
Oh, now that's different.
It is different.
Yeah.
Just good words.
He's just coming up with L words at this point.
And then of course there's location quotient, which is another L word. Yeah, but leakage is sales that are going outside the trade area to be serviced.
Right. Yes.
Right.
And do you remember what the opposite is?
Of leakage?
Where there's people from outside the trade area coming in and you're capturing dollars that you wouldn't expect within that trade area.
What does it start with?
D. Dis.
I don't know.
Displaced sales.
Displaced.
Yeah, anyway.
No, I wouldn't have come up with that. But yeah, okay.
I should have saved that question for the quiz. Anyway.
You should have told him basic jobs because that's money coming into the trade area.
Yeah, that's right.
New dollar bills.
But it has nothing to do with displaced sales. But.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So here, in just being able to compare different types of buildings for the user's perspective, they're not buying anything, right? In this case, they're going to be renting space in a multi-tenant building.
Right.
And we could utilize those exact same time value of money and cash flow skills and to determine which is going to be in the best interest of that user. Kind of interesting. And of course, when they sit down at the negotiating table, one wants maximum return on invested capital, the other one wants maximum utility at minimum cost. Is there any question that sets up a negotiation here because they're coming at things from completely different perspectives?
Right.
Think of it this way, Timmy. Can you imagine in your head the number 6? Okay?
Yeah.
Now take that and just turn it 90 degrees so it's on its side. Mm-hmm. And you have one person at one end, you have one person at the other end. Sees it as a 6. The person at the other end sees it as a 9.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they're both right. It just depends on your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to think about how users would do that.
Yeah.
Another thing we might want to think about too is what about if there was somebody who was looking for a single tenant building to occupy the whole thing, they want to lease a whole warehouse. They're not going to be a multi-tenant, but they're going to lease the whole warehouse, or they're going to lease a whole building of something for a particular reason. And maybe that property is offered for lease or for sale. So how should they acquire it? Because it's not written anywhere that they have to lease it.
Right.
Are they going to be better off to buy or better off to lease?
So when it comes to user decision analysis, one part is how do you look at all these different lease options?
Right.
And actually compare them.
And then communicate it.
And then negotiate it. Or a lot of businesses, now whether they should or not is another question, but a lot of them won't lease, they'll just buy the building and put their business in there.
Right, owner, user.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So one big question that users of space need to think through is, should they lease or should they buy?
Right.
Now, how on earth would you do that?
And that we will figure out next week in part 2 with Jim Rosen. We've got over an hour left of this subject with Jim Rosen. So we split it up in 2 parts so that you could really digest it, soak it in. We've also got the pop quiz coming in next week's episode. So if you have not yet, hit subscribe, ding that little bell.
Yeah. And if you've gotten any value from these episodes, we really appreciate you investing your time, which is so valuable. We don't take that for granted. We're very grateful. But if you've gotten anything out of this, we'd invite you to especially head over to Apple and leave a review. That helps us out a ton.
Yeah.
That helps this podcast get exposed to more people that it can help. And so if you want to give back to us a little bit and help us out, that'd be a great way to do it.
The best way.
We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've got a free weekly newsletter that goes out every Thursday. You can sign up at subscribe.wgbarron.com. It will show you the next episode and several other articles about
negotiation, business, entrepreneurship, leadership. It's not just about commercial real estate.
Yeah.
But it's a way to connect with us and see what's coming and get the latest podcast episodes directly to your inbox.
That's
We'd
right.
invite you to join us there. It's free. Comes out Thursdays, I believe.
Thursdays.
Every week.
Yeah, it's great. If you admire my older brother Bo like I do, this is the kind of stuff that he really sinks his teeth into. Hop on, join us. And then finally, Bo is doing a series with CCIM
called Currently Commercial, and you've got a very exciting guest coming up on the next one.
Yeah, depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening to it basically when it's published, June 26th is our next webinar. You can go to ccim.com, go to the education tab and type in Currently Commercial, and you'll be able to register for that. And I've got Bryant Cheeley from, I said he was from Lafayette, Louisiana. He's not. He lives in Baton Rouge.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And he's going to come on and show us some ways to streamline operations in commercial real estate using AI. And I had a call with him yesterday, and we kind of walked through what he's going to be covering, and it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I can't wait to learn what he's got for us. So,
Yeah, we've talked about...
please join us. We'd love to have you join us there.
Yeah, that link will be in the comments too, or in the show notes, wherever you're listening or watching. And of course, we throw that in the newsletter as well. That might be the easiest way to get that. But we've done ChatGPT episodes before, but we are not experts. We know just a little bit of it, so I'm actually excited to hear what you're going to learn.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Would he come on this, or would that be a conflict of interest?
Yeah, I totally expect to have him on in the future.
Yeah, because I'm so interested. I got questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, for the podcast, there's a couple guests I have in mind. I'm taking an AI course from a buddy of mine named Michael Hieronymus, who's a 102 instructor like I am.
Yeah.
Good friend of mine. I'm taking his course right now. It's unbelievable. And we'll probably have him on about the time he launches the next group going through his course.
Oh, nice.
So we can promote that a little bit. But
yeah,
man, some of the stuff he's showing is next level awesome.
Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got some, the point is here, we got some great guests lined up.
Yep.
And you know what? We ask you a lot in the comments, like to let us know what you would like to learn, and we will answer them and oftentimes do a whole episode on it. But if you've got any ideas of guests that you think would be...
Yeah, somebody you'd love to hear from.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, let us know, because, we're always looking for guests and good people. And yeah. All right. Love you, brother.
Love you, man.
We'll see y'all next Monday. Bye,
All
Alice.
right. Bye.